Hello everyone, I'm Parisa. Today we have a guest of honor, Puma, here. He's a little sleepy, so we let him just chill. This video is the second video of the series Why Relationships Fail. In the previous video, we talked about the main reason, the global image of why relationships fail. And the main reason behind it is that a lot of people don't allow true love and true happiness to happen to them because of their conditioning from their childhood and because of all the traumas that we all go through at some point of our life, and we don't heal it and bring it with us to our next relationship. And certain traumas happen within each relationship, and we just accumulate and move forward with it and bring all of it to the next relationship. So that's a global image. But in this video specifically, we're going to talk about how this situation transpires in a relationship. And the main area that all traumas show themselves in any relationship is during conflicts. Conflicts are our gateway to growth, not just within the relationship and just as a couple, but also individually. That's why relationships are specifically so important in our individual growth, and that's why a lot of things that need to come to our awareness and maybe haven't yet came to our awareness show themselves within our relationships. So relationships, and specifically conflicts within relationships, are huge gateways for all of us to grow if we pull ourselves outside of the situation that we are fighting and just look at it with a different lens and with the eyes of curiosity and with an open mind. And I'm going to explain to you how to do that. But first, let me tell you what happens during conflicts. So we talked about all traumas in the previous video. Again, if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. That's the foundation for this whole series of why relationships fail. We're gonna have another series on how to thrive in a relationship. But first, we gotta go through this. I know it's painful, I know it's negative, talking about failing, but it's essential to really put yourself through it and bear with me so we can get to the thriving part. When you go through conflict in your relationship, what happens is that we have two different people with different mindsets, different experiences, different perspective, different ways of life sitting in front of each other and looking at the same situation from two different angles, right? Each person, they come as a package. And when you open this package, there's amazing qualities in there, there's great personality, there's great aspect of that person that you probably admire about them. And there are some areas of their personality or areas of their thinking or some areas within that package that could be annoying to you, right? Some areas within that package that are not all amazing and pretty. Some areas that are dark. Some areas that come from their way of life. I mean, they didn't just drop from the sky. They've been through life. And when we go through life, we accumulate a lot of amazing experiences and we accumulate a lot of negative experiences that form us in a negative way, which is called traumas. When those are not released, when those are not healed, which in most of people they're not, and two people come together as two different packages and the conflict happens, there is a disconnect between these two people, because what you see and what you hear on the surface is one side of the equation, and there's another side of the equation that's completely happening underneath the surface. You don't see it, you don't hear it, you don't talk about it, but it's the part of feelings and emotions that usually we're not so great at sharing. We're not even so great at acknowledging or even being aware of our emotions. So during any conflict, there is a top part over the surface that you hear, you see, you talk about, you fight about, and there is another part underneath the surface that you don't see and you don't talk about it. And that's the underneath part of the surface is what really determines the course of that conflict. And the course of our conflicts determine the course of our relationships. So it's really important to dig deep and look at the part that's underneath the surface and think about how is that affecting this conflict? How is that affecting this conversation? What people say and what you hear coming out of their mouth is usually very different from how they feel. They might not even acknowledge it to themselves how they feel. let's say you and I are in a conflicted argument. I tell you something, the words that come out of my mouth are interpreted a certain way in your mind. And the way that interpretation happens in your mind triggers certain emotions in you. And those emotions trigger a response in you. And then there are words that come out of your mouth. And then my mind grabs those words and interprets them in a certain way. And the way that interpretation happens in me triggers certain emotional response. And those emotions trigger another response on the surface from my mouth to you, or certain gesture or behavior. And you see that, you hear that, you observe that. And again, same cycle happens over and over. That triggers emotional response in you based on your interpretations of my behavior and my words, and your emotions trigger response from you. And I see that, I hear that, that triggers response. So this whole cycle goes on. And again, what we see, what we hear, what we observe is what comes out of our mouth, the behaviors that happens. What we don't know is emotional responses that we keep experiencing during this conversation or this argument that's beneath the surface. So for any argument to be able to be resolved, we really need to look deep and see, okay, what was that? What was that emotion that triggered your response? The interpretation that happens in your mind and the emotional response that happens based on that interpretation, everything that's happening under the surface, all that is very closely tied to our triggers based on our previous traumas. Each trauma that's unhealed triggers certain set of emotions, and if that trauma wasn't there, if you remove that from the equation, the set of reactions and emotional responses could be completely different. So the reason healing your past is so important in your future relationships is because all these unhealed wounds, if they're touched even slightly, even not with an intention of the other person to touch it, but if they touch it slightly, it hurts. And when it hurts, the emotional response that comes from it is very different compared to if that wound just wasn't there. So in another word, within each conflict and within each conflicted argument, there are certain trigger points that are being touched in each person. And these trigger points are attached to unhealed wounds and unhealed traumas from our past. So in order for that conflict and that argument to be fully resolved and get somewhere and not keep repeating itself over and over, which happens a lot, we need to really dig deep and see what's being triggered. What's being triggered in me, first of all, and what's being triggered in my partner. If we don't know the triggers, if we don't know the wounds that are bleeding, there is no way we can resolve a conflict. We think we're resolving it, we move on, we get over it, we talk about it, we just go buy flowers and try to pretend it didn't happen, brush it under the rug, and then it's gonna happen again, and again, and again. If you look at any relationships, I've seen this many, many times. If you look at any relationship from outside, you see certain arguments, 2 or 3 usually, topics that keep repeating itself. And the reason they keep repeating is because we don't know how to full-on resolve it. And to be able to full-on resolve a conflict and argument, we need to work on ourselves individually, to work on these trigger points so they're not so painful anymore. And in order to do that, we need to work on what's underneath of it, which is the traumas that has happened to us during our life. So we need to identify the traumas that are creating trigger points in each set of these conflicts. I hope it makes sense. I know it's a lot to take in, especially if you've never done healing and trauma work in the past, but it's impossible to have a happy relationship when you don't work on yourself. In order for a relationship to be thriving, each person, each partner needs to really put the work and think about all this, bring it into awareness, think about what's really being triggered. I know you're the only person you have control over. You can't really force your partner to go do this work, but the least you can do, and the most important part that you can do, is to work on yourself and think about what is triggering you and heal that, And then you can think about what's triggering your partner and make sure that you use words and phrases and different ways of communication that doesn't trigger them as much. I'll leave it at that for today, and in the next video we're gonna go more in depth in this topic and open it up. It's just like onion, layers of onion. We're gonna open it and get more and more in depth with it to be able to make it to simple solutions, and then we will work our way up. Thank you for watching. Puma appreciates you too. See you in the next video.